Right now, in the middle of the biggest series of his career, one Vegas Golden Knights player just broke a record that's never been touched in the franchise's entire history. Not Mark Stone, not Jonathan Marchessault, not even Jack Eichel, Brett Howden, the guy most casual fans couldn't pick out of a lineup at the start of this postseason, now has more playoff goals in a single year than any Golden Knight ever has. And he did it while his team is fighting for its life in the Stanley Cup final. This is the story of how a player nobody was talking about quietly became the most important name on a cup contender. Let's start with who Brett Howden actually is, because most people watching this have probably heard his name 100 times without really knowing his story. Howden was a first-round pick by the New York Rangers back in 2016, the kind of prospect scouts loved for his size, his hockey IQ, and his ability to play in every situation. But in New York, he never quite broke out. He was a solid third or fourth line center, a guy you'd describe as reliable, dependable, the kind of player who does a lot of the dirty work that never shows up on a highlight reel. Then came the trade that changed everything. Howden was sent to Vegas as part of a package, and almost overnight, his career found a new gear. Vegas has built its entire identity around depth scoring. Their philosophy is simple. Every line should be able to hurt you, not just the top one. And Howden, more than maybe any other player on the roster, has become the living embodiment of that philosophy. Now picture the start of this year's playoffs. Vegas opens the postseason, and Howden starts doing something he's never done before at this level. He's not just chipping in a goal here and there, he's scoring in bunches. A goal in the first round against a team that was supposed to shut his line down completely. Then another. And another. By the time Vegas wrapped up their first round series, Howden already had more goals than some entire teams managed in the same round. And here's the part that should have gotten more attention. This wasn't garbage time scoring, the kind you get when a series is already decided and the other team has packed it in. These were momentum-shifting, series-altering goals, scored when the games were still up for grabs. The second round is where things really took off. Vegas faced a Colorado team that had just won the President's Trophy for having the best record in the entire league all season long. On paper, this was supposed to be a David versus Goliath matchup, and a lot of analysts picked Colorado to roll through. But Howden had other plans. Picture the scene. Vegas is on the road, the building is loud, the Avalanche fans are sensing blood after a late coaching change had Vegas looking shaky heading into the series. And then Howden scores. Not just once. He becomes one of the central reasons Vegas pulls off the upset, eliminating the best team in the league and advancing to the conference final. At this point, people inside the league started noticing. Teammates were calling him a workhorse. Coaches were pointing to his line as the reason Vegas had so much firepower. But outside the Vegas locker room, the headlines were still going to other names. Mitch Marner's arrival in Vegas this season had been the biggest story of the entire year, and rightfully so. His point totals this postseason are absolutely historic. But while everyone was watching Marner rack up assists and highlight reel plays, Howden was quietly doing something just as remarkable. He was scoring. By the time Vegas advanced to the Stanley Cup final, Howden's goal total had climbed to a number that made longtime Golden Knights fans go check the record books. 14 goals in a single postseason. For context, this Vegas franchise has only existed since 2017. They've made multiple deep playoff runs, including a Stanley Cup win in 2023. They've had elite goal scorers come through this locker room, and none of them, not one, had ever scored 14 goals in a single playoff run until Brett Howden did it this year. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting, because this record isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the middle of one of the most chaotic Stanley Cup finals in recent memory. Vegas is currently facing the Carolina Hurricanes, and this series has been an absolute roller coaster. Every single game so far has been a battle, with both teams trading high-scoring nights that fans and analysts say haven't been seen at this level in decades. And right now, Vegas finds itself trailing in the series. After a hard-fought Game 5 loss in Carolina, the Golden Knights are heading back home to Las Vegas, needing a win just to keep their season alive. The pressure is enormous. Lose and the season is over. win, and they force a Game 7 with a chance to defend their championship pedigree. This is exactly the kind of moment where Howden's record becomes more than just a stat on a page. It becomes a question: can he keep it going? Vegas needs every single goal they can get right now, and the player who's been quietly outscoring everyone on the roster all postseasons is about to play in the biggest game of his career on home ice, with elimination on the line. Think the pressure here for a second. Howden isn't a superstar who's used to carrying a team. He's a guy who spent years as a complimentary piece in New York before finding his footing in Vegas. And now, in the highest stakes moment of his life, he's the franchise's all-time leader in single postseason goals. With the season hanging in the balance, if Vegas wins Game 6 and forces a Game 7, you can bet Howden's name is going to be front and center of every storyline. And if he scores again, even just once more, he extends a record that, frankly, some of the best players to ever wear a Golden Knights jersey couldn't touch. But if Vegas loses, this record becomes something different. It becomes the story of a remarkable individual run on a team that ultimately came up just short, in a series so tight, so high scoring, and so dramatic that it might be remembered as one of the best Stanley Cup finals of this entire era. Either way, one thing is certain: Brett Howden went from a name most casual hockey fans wouldn't recognize to a player who rewrote the Vegas Golden Knights record book in real time during a Stanley Cup final that's already being talked about as one for the ages. So here's the real question heading into Game 6. Vegas is fighting for their season at home. Howden is fighting to extend a record that's never been touched in franchise history. And the entire hockey world is about to find out if a cup final that's already broken multiple scoring records is about to get even more historic. If you want to see how this Stanley Cup final got to this point, with both teams scoring more goals through the first 4 games than almost any final in the last 45 years, that full breakdown is on screen right now. Click it to see how we got here. 37 years old, 14 seasons with one team. And right now, Jordan Staal is scoring goals in the Stanley Cup final that nobody has scored in over 50 years. In 5 straight games against the Vegas Golden Knights, Staal has put the puck in the net every single game. He now sits at 6 goals for the series, and that number alone puts him in a category of players that most hockey fans only read about in history books. Let's start with the record itself, because the context makes it hit harder. 5 consecutive games with a goal in the Stanley Cup final. Only 5 players in the entire history of the NHL have ever done it. And before Staal did it Thursday night in Game 5, the last time anyone pulled it off was 1973. Yvon Cournoyer playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Before Cournoyer, it was Jean Beliveau in 1956, Maurice Richard in 1951, and going all the way back to 1918, Cyclone Taylor. These are legends. These are names in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And now Jordan Staal's name sits right next to them. What makes this even more remarkable is who Staal is. He's not known as a goal scorer. He never has been. For most of his career, Staal built his reputation as one of the best defensive centers in the league. The guy you trust to shut down the other team's top line, to win face-offs in critical moments, to sacrifice stats for the good of the team. He had 2 goals in 13 playoff games before the Stanley Cup final even started, and then the series began. And something clicked. Now he has 6 goals in 5 games. He's the oldest player in NHL history to score 6 goals in a Stanley Cup final. And Carolina's coach Rod Brind'Amour put it best after Game 5. Doing it at his age just says a lot about him. He's our guy and he's our warrior, and I'm really happy for him. So how exactly has he been doing it? Staal isn't scoring highlight reel snipe goals from the top of the circle. Every goal he's scored in this series has come from hard work, positioning, reading plays, putting himself in the right spot at the right time. That's who he is. His Game 5 goal is a perfect example. Nikolai Ehlers carries the puck and finds Staal in the high slot. Staal redirects it, tips it over Carter Hart's left pad, and just like that, it's 1-1 in the first period. Clean, calm, decisive. His Game 4 goal was the complete opposite, and arguably the most memorable moment of the series so far. With the game tied late in the 3rd period, Staal got the puck and his feet got tangled. He started to fall. His forehand wasn't there, so he reached back with his backhand while he was practically lying on the ice and somehow flipped it past Hart for the game winner. He didn't even know it went in at first. He put his face down on the ice and just let out a yell. That goal, that moment, is what this series has been about. He talked about it after the game. I was in my own world. It was an incredible moment, obviously, and just let a big yell go. 5 goals, all different, all clutch, and every single one of them came in a game that mattered. Here's a stat that stopped a lot of hockey people in their tracks this week. The last time Jordan Staal had a 5-game goal streak, he was 18 years old, February 2007. He was a teenager on the Pittsburgh Penguins, playing in just his first full NHL season. Fast forward 19 years. Same player, same streak. Except now he's 37. He is the only player in NHL history, regular season or playoffs, to record a 5-game goal streak as a teenager and after turning 35. Nobody else has done that on both ends of their career. It's a number that puts the entire arc of what Staal has meant to this sport into perspective. When he was 18, nobody was surprised. He was the 2nd overall pick, a physical force, a kid with a bright future ahead of him. At 37, in the Stanley Cup final, after 14 seasons of being the unsung anchor of this franchise, that's something different entirely. His teammate Jackson Blake said it perfectly. He's a dog, like, if I'm going to be honest. That's not a knock. That's the highest compliment you can give a hockey player. It means he competes every single shift, every single game, no matter the stakes, no matter the moment. Game 5 wasn't just Staal's night. It was the night the Hurricanes reminded everyone why they're 1 win away from the Stanley Cup. Carolina beat Vegas 4-2 on Thursday at Lenovo Center in Raleigh. Andrei Svechnikov scored twice on the power play. Sebastian Aho finally broke through with his first goal of the series. And goaltender Brandon Bussi made 23 saves in his 2nd straight start in the final. Both wins. Bussi is the first goalie in NHL history to make his first 2 career playoff starts in the Stanley Cup final and win both. That's not a footnote. That's another historic storyline running alongside everything Staal is doing. Svechnikov was emotional after the game. "This is the biggest win in my life," personally he said. "Thank God we won that game, and obviously all focus right now in our mind is we've got one more win to get here." The Hurricanes lead the series 3-2. Game 6 is Sunday night in Las Vegas, and Carolina will be looking to become the franchise's first Stanley Cup champion since 2006, when a teenage Eric Staal hoisted it in Raleigh. Now it's Jordan's turn, one complication for Vegas, heading into Game 6. Center William Karlsson left Game 5 in the 2nd period with what appeared to be a left arm injury after taking a hit from defenseman Sean Walker. Vegas coach John Tortorella suggested Karlsson would not be available for Game 6. Karlsson is a key piece in Vegas's top 6 and plays in all situations. Losing him doesn't end their chances, but it makes the already difficult climb back even steeper. Tortorella, for his part, refused to fold. "We'll be back here. We're just going to do it in a different order." And he added with some classic Tortorella delivery, "I'm going to leave my clothes here, that's for sure." 5 straight games with a goal. Nobody in NHL history has ever scored in 6. That's the record sitting in Jordan Staal right now. Game 6, Sunday night, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Carolina comes in 1 win away from the Cup. Vegas comes in desperate, fighting to stay alive. The Stanley Cup itself will be in the building. And in that moment, Staal will have the chance to do something that has never been done: score in 6 consecutive Stanley Cup final games. Not Gretzky, not Lemieux, not Ovechkin. Nobody. When he was asked about the historical company he's already joined, Staal kept it short and honest. "Good company, but I'm looking for wins." That's the whole story in 5 words. He's not chasing records. He's chasing the cup. The records are just happening because of how locked in he is. Carolina also has a 17-year storyline running here. Staal last won the Stanley Cup in 2009 with the Pittsburgh Penguins. His first goal of this series came 6,202 days after he last scored in a Cup final. If Carolina wins Sunday, that gap between championships would be the longest in NHL history for any player. A career-long journey, all of it pointing toward one more win. Jordan Staal is 37 years old, and he is rewriting history in the most important games of the season. 6 goals in 5 games, the oldest player ever with 6 goals in a Stanley Cup final, 5 consecutive games with a goal, tied for the longest streak in league history, and 1 game away from breaking it outright. Carolina needs 1 more win. Stahl needs 1 more goal. Whatever happens Sunday night in Vegas, this is already one of the great individual performances in Stanley Cup final history. From a player who built his entire career on doing the things that don't show up in the highlight reel. On a Friday morning in early June, Peter Laviolette was in Toronto, not visiting, not passing through. He was there for the job. NHL Cedrons had picked up on his presence in the city, and behind closed doors, people inside the organization were already talking about a press conference. The expectation, based on multiple reports, was simple. Laviolette would be named the next head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs sometime early the following week. And then Saturday came, and Sunday came, and by Monday, Peter Laviolette was no longer the future of Toronto hockey. He was the new head coach of the Los Angeles Kings. In 48 hours, one of the most closely watched coaching searches in recent NHL history flipped completely on its head. And the Maple Leafs, a franchise already navigating one of the most turbulent off-seasons in years, were left back at square one. To understand how this happened, you need to understand how badly Toronto needed this hire to work. The 2025-26 season was a disaster for the Maple Leafs. A quiet, grinding disaster that had been building for months and finally became impossible to ignore when the team posted a 32-36-14 record and missed the playoffs for the first time in 9 years. 9 years of first-round exits and deep disappointments, and this time they did not even get that far. The fan base was done. The front office was done. General manager Brad Treliving was fired near the end of the regular season, and head coach Craig Berube was let go shortly after. Into that wreckage stepped John Chayka, the new general manager, a younger hockey executive who arrived with a reputation for analytical thinking and a mandate to rebuild the entire culture of the franchise. Mats Sundin joined as a senior executive advisor. The front office was completely restructured, and the coaching search that followed was framed from the very beginning as a defining decision for this new era of Maple Leafs hockey. Chayka was deliberate about it. Speaking at the NHL Scouting Combine in Buffalo, he told reporters there was no artificial timeline on the search. His words were precise. He described the process as being focused on conviction, not speed. Over 50 initial conversations took place before the field began to narrow, and as the weeks went on, 3 names kept rising to the surface. Patrick Roy, the Hall of Fame goaltender and Jack Adams Award winner, fierce and demanding, with the kind of competitive intensity that either ignites a locker room or burns it down. Jay Woodcroft, the Toronto native who led the Edmonton Oilers through 2 strong playoff runs before stepping into an assistant role with Anaheim. And Peter Laviolette of the 3. Laviolette was the most decorated. 846 career wins, 7th all-time among NHL head coaches. He had guided 3 franchises to the Stanley Cup final, winning it with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2006. He had rebuilt the Philadelphia Flyers, steadied the Nashville Predators, and most recently led the New York Rangers to the President's Trophy and a conference final appearance. He was not just experienced, he was proven under pressure in major markets, with star players who needed managing. For a Toronto team built around Auston Matthews, a franchise star dealing with a serious knee injury and an uncertain timeline heading into next season, Laviolette's profile felt like exactly the right fit. He had handled demanding veterans. He had won in playoff atmospheres. He knew how to build structure around offensive talent without killing the creativity that made that talent special. And so by the first week of June, the picture had become clear enough that people close to the situation believed a decision was close. Laviolette flew to Toronto. He was seen in the city. NHL insider Nick Kypreus went on air and said exactly what he had been told. I was told on Friday that Laviolette was going to be the next coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was spotted in town, and I would imagine that LA did some fast talking on Saturday or Sunday. We could have been looking at a press conference on Monday or Tuesday. Did LA essentially swoop in and steal him from the Leafs? The answer, based on everything that has come out since, is yes. At some point over that weekend, the Los Angeles Kings made their move. The Kings had been dealing with their own coaching vacancy after parting ways with head coach Jim Hiller, with DJ Smith finishing the season on an interim basis. They had been connected to multiple candidates, but once Laviolette became available in a real way, once word circulated that he was close to committing elsewhere, Los Angeles accelerated.